This is Navigating Cyber Risk podcast with me, John Riley, and George Usey as your hosts. Join us as we explore the challenges faced by executives as they grapple with new and ever-changing cybersecurity mandates. Welcome to Navigating Cyber Risk with your host, John Riley, where we are going to explore the challenges faced by executives as they grapple with cybersecurity mandates and regulations. And today we've got an amazing guest who is an attorney barred in multiple states across these wonderful United States. He's an avid e-bike rider. He's a foodie here in the Tampa Bay area. And introducing Joe Lazzarotti with Jackson Lewis. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. So we're going to just jump right in here with the main topic, which is, what's the difference that you see between cybersecurity and cyber risk?
No, it's a great question. I guess the way I think about that is cybersecurity may be a state of an enterprise or an environment at any given time, what your state of cybersecurity is, and maybe cyber risk is what you need that to be, what you need that state of cybersecurity to be once you've analyzed the risk, because you need to have your cybersecurity reflect the risk to your organization.
And sometimes I think sometimes people protect the wrong things. Coming from a network engineering background, we always hear that there's layers of security. But if you're protecting the wrong thing, it doesn't matter. If you have 5 firewalls, but the database doesn't live inside, you might not need the 5 firewalls and spend the money elsewhere.
No, I think that's right. I know a lot of times there's a lot of stories about insider threat, and a lot of the resources go to protecting the perimeter and not so much what's going on inside that perimeter. Same exact thing. I agree.
Or who has access to what? I mean, does everybody need access to that database or the data that's in there, or can you restrict that down and maybe understand a little bit about who should have access? I think that's one of the funny things that I've always seen also is that I see a lot of CEOs that say I should have unfettered access to something, right? And then on top of that, I don't want the 2-factor authentication because it slows me down. And there's always a reason, right? And so those executives are the ones that are making those decisions. And one of the things that we've done is to have them accept that cyber risk. So, okay, you can do that, but you understand that you are putting yourself at risk and you're taking the personal responsibility for doing that, correct? Then it gives more pause.
No, I think that's right. And, I think it's also having one thing I see is a lot of times there's a lot of silos. And so even identifying the risk may depend on who's identifying it and in what people in the organization that you ask, because somebody may have a different perspective and no one really was able to think about that to address it. So really getting the other side of that, maybe it's legal, maybe it's, sales, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's HR. There's different components to that risk that you need to kind of take into account.
So, and that makes a great point. I mean, so as far as that makes, when you talk about silos, right? What we find a lot of times is that when we go to talk to an executive, what they do is they toss it over to the fence to the technical guy, right? Oh, that's IT stuff, right? Cybersecurity, that's just IT stuff. They don't understand that those silos exist and that those databases are there for their other employees and that's the whole purpose of it. And the IT guy really doesn't know. He knows he's supporting a database, right? He might know some of the data that's in there, but he doesn't know that they're plugging in credit card data or PII data or whatever. He's just taking care of the database, or they are taking care of the database. So I think that it's not fair to just say that, well, that's an IT thing, cybersecurity anymore, right? It's got to be an organizational item and something that goes across organizations or across departments for it to actually be worthy.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, even in different things, whether it's cyber or privacy or AI, a lot of times when I talk to clients, they're like, well, give me a policy, as if there's this magical, which I get, and you try to say, well, okay. And you start to have to ask some questions about what exactly, and of course, maybe you know the industry of your client, but you don't know who their customers are, what kind of agreements that they've signed. And you don't know what elements of data are impacted. And you don't know what states they operated in, because as you know, right, you have all these state laws that are now popping up. And so it really becomes a pretty complex question. And, the frameworks that apply there's a lot of overlap, I think, in those frameworks, but, it'd be great to have some more information from different folks in the organization, and you probably would be in a much better place.
Absolutely. So along those lines then, what do you think the most significant cybersecurity threats that are facing companies today?
I mean, if you look at it from a media perspective, it's probably the next threat actor group that's going to hack your system, and you worry about that. But I do think that what people are surmising about AI and how that could leverage different types of attack vectors that we haven't been used to with deep fakes and some of that. I think that's a pretty scary thing. It's a lot of unknowns, but I also think it's just back to basics as well, where people just are still trying to struggle with, you know, not clicking on that link and just day to day basic blocking and tackling, good hygiene. May sound it's not sexy, but I think it is also really, really important and leads to a lot of problems if you're not careful with it.
That I mean, I think I would say that there's also maybe some questions around how dedicated the person is. Are they paying attention? Are they able to pay attention? I mean, is there something going on in their life? Is there is are they distracted with a bill that's not paid? Or I mean, there's a reason that when you're dealing with like high security data, they do the background checks to make sure that you're able to do it without being blackmailed or into forfeiting the data or anything else. So I think that there's definitely background checks should be required for any type of person that's accessing data like that.
No, it makes sense. I mean, I know that I'm not an expert in background check law. I know that I have colleagues that just eat and breathe this stuff. And from what I've seen, there's always like that exception for people who work in certain industries. Like there's a little bit more latitude for people on background checks for people who work in certain industries, because usually it's around financial services and the idea is we got to protect the money. But to your point, right? It's about, yes, that's true, but now it's the data that gets you to the money. So you kind of have to worry about that also. And so, yeah, that's a big gap.
So you work with a lot of CEOs, and so when you're talking to them, what kind of prioritization do you tell them that they should put on that cyber risk part of it? I mean, is it something that's in the forefront of their mind, or is it something that's kind of an afterthought of maybe after a scare or something like that, where they're like, oh, okay, maybe I should clean the house.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in some ways, I think there's some good news in a glimmer of good news. I think there's, over the last, I don't know, it's probably been maybe over 20 years that the top complaint to the FTC has been, you know, identity theft and all these breaches, and it's sinking in. And I think CEOs really understand that. The real issue, I think, for a lot of CEOs is, to your point, you get hit with a breach. It's not so much the disclosure of personal information, although that's a big deal, but it's the business interruption that really causes a concern. And so if you have a business that's more vulnerable to business interruption, if you can operate easily or you could manage without your systems if they're taken down, that CEO may find that there's maybe bigger or equal fish to fry. But if you're in a business where if your system goes down, you're going to be in a real bad way, and you're going to have customers who are even more upset, then I find that there's more focus to that. But yeah, so I do think CEOs are more focused on this, and trying to get them to that point is not is a little bit easier.
And I think, and I agree with you. And I think that 2 years ago, maybe 5 years, 10 years ago, before some of the automation, right? I mean, I'm thinking like even a CNC shop, right? I mean, a lot of their things are now stored on some sort of server that then is sent directly to the machine. So I mean, the reliance on those electronic devices it's continuing to grow, and therefore so is that risk, because I mean there almost isn't there isn't a company out there that doesn't have data that needs to be protected or that needs to be sheltered in some way.
No, I think that's right. And yeah, I mean, to your point, it's like the whole, even if a CEO might get comfortable with their environment, you're kind of only as strong as your weakest link. And so much of what businesses do is through supply chains and, the business partners that they work with. So that's a big gap, I think, as well.
Well, supply chains is another one of the big concepts that we talk about, right? Because I mean, are your vendors that everybody's got their data in Microsoft Outlook or in the cloud, right? But when was the last time you actually backed up the cloud? Because if you look at like the Microsoft user license agreement, it says that we don't back it up, and it's your responsibility to secure it. And they do the technology parts of it, but you still have to be the identity person. You have to make sure that you've got the right people with the right accounts and that they have access to the right things. And if you screw that up, Microsoft goes, yeah, you screwed up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious on your thoughts on this because it to me, it's an interesting issue, but, like, after some of these file transfer breaches for the last several years and others, those aren't the only ones, of course, but the idea of, well, how far down the chain do you go? When if you're thinking about you think about fourth party risk, everybody's saying, well, what's the third party? But what about the fourth party and the fifth party? And it's like, how far down do you go? Because now there's so much interconnectivity. Those entities way down the chain could cause a lot of harm for a lot of other folks that they may not even know, you know?
Yep. And does that new startup that's doing that crazy good thing for you, are they actually certified? Should they have the data? But yeah, that's a whole nother that's a whole nother podcast I think we'd have to talk about. So let me ask you this: I mean, I don't know if you've worked with CEOs as they've been through that journey where they've actually been hacked, but I mean, what do you think that looks like for them when, like, an executive finds out they get that call first thing in the morning? Because it always happens overnight, so it's like 6 a.m. They get that call that says, "Hey, we're locked out of the system, and customers are screaming at us, and they're banging on the door. What would you like us to do?"
Yeah,
Right?
we've dealt with hundreds of clients on data breaches, and you're right, it's either at a bad time of day or it's the Friday before a holiday weekend, and, I know one of the things that we really try to do is kinda give them some comfort because 'cause we've done it many times, and there's other great firms out there that have done it, and you get through it, right? You get through it, and I think they need to know that up front because it's a lot of unknowns, and particularly for smaller businesses that may feel like, "Hey, this is gonna sink our business, our clients are never gonna forgive us," and so I think giving them a level setting with them a little bit about, "Here's what this process looks like," and with a few questions, you can kinda get some sense of their business and what the road might look in the next 3 to 6 weeks. But I think that's a big part of it is trying to give them a little bit of an understanding of the process, give them a little comfort because now they have to make some important decisions. And if they're all worked up over that, which you don't know everything at that point, it can be kind of hard. And you really need to be a little bit methodical about, what kind of an incident is this? What kind of data is really affected, if any? Who's the threat actor? What are some next steps immediately? Like there's a bunch of things, but yeah, I think it's just kind of grounding them and then being methodical and then moving forward, in a pretty quick but prudent way.
One of the things we also like to talk about is practice it before you actually have to play the Super Bowl, right? I mean, you don't want the Pee Wee team out there trying to play the Super Bowl. So try and figure out who it is, where what would it look like? Play some of those. Who's going to be in charge? Who's the quarterback at that time?
Right. That's
Right?
right.
And then who are the players? I mean, in your case, I would say put your retainer in, right? I mean, hey, I'm just gonna give you a retainer just in case I get hacked so that I can call you and you'll answer my phone. Give my phone call that day, right? Same thing for a PR company or, any other contacts that you might need for when that happens. So
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's right, and when you say practice, you probably wanna practice with those folks too, and you wanna build that rapport early on, and you wanna get a sense of, you know, what kind of CEO is this? I know I do, how risk averse are they? And then in the process, I learn about the client's business. I learn, you know, how they operate, who are the key people, how they go about making decisions, what kind of data that they have. You're exactly right. Those sessions can be really crucial.
I mean, I'd want to call you on a quarterly basis. Just make sure you pick up the phone, and then we're still good, and we're going to go. I mean, just as part of my planning, right? I mean, that way we know if it happens and that phone rings and you see that number, you know who it
That's
is,
right, that's right.
and it's time. So excellent. So from your perspective, taking a look at what's going on, I mean, we got AI, we got robotics, we've got quantum computing. I mean, what do you believe is going to have the most profound impact on cybersecurity in the near future?
Things have moved so fast over the last couple of years. It's really so hard to say. I mean, how, you know, I think we're going to kind of move in a parallel direction. Things are just going to continue to escalate because the bad guys have the technologies as well. So on the one hand, and I'd love to get your sense of this. I mean, I think you're more maybe closer to this than I am. But I feel like, that the IT security folks that lead those efforts at companies want to leverage that technology to protect their companies, but the bad guys are doing the same thing. And so in many ways, we think that there's some advantage to it, but that advantage could be easily overcome. So it's really, from my perspective, it's hard to really gauge those types of technologies, but it's just a little unsettling. So we'll see.
My perspective on it, I mean, we've got a lot of changes that are coming, right? I mean, if you can use AI to say, help me break, give me steps to break into this company. I mean, or help write code that does this or takes advantage of this port. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things that AI could do. Robotics is going to be interesting. Deep fakes. I mean, some of the things. I actually had a friend of mine who was buying a house. The bank called him. He was moving money anyways. The point is that somebody did a man-in-the-middle attack on him on his personal phone, and he responded back to the bank with a code and did a deep fake of his voice and was able to get them to transfer money into their account. I mean, and those are the things that we even if you're talking to somebody, it was via Zoom, you're not going to know that person's the right person anymore. And so I think that there's going to be some opportunities and some ways that we're going to have to learn to do things. I mean, the good guys will have to put some sort of regulation in that says if it's AI based, there needs to be like a little plus sign over here in this corner that says it's AI, right? No matter what. Now, there's going to be bad people that don't do that or that remove it, but I mean, at least we'll have something to try and help us identify it as humans.
Well, maybe that's the thing, John. Maybe it's, leveraging AI to really help awareness with people, because to your point, that's a big part of this is just people doing their job, trying to be efficient, trying to get the job done, and trying to move inefficiencies out of the way. But in the process, they can really create some big, they can really step in it and cause some problems. I know that we were talking over the weekend with some friends and, about some of this stuff. And someone said, well, make sure you always have a safe word with your kids so that if something does happen, because there was that I think that attorney from Philadelphia, I don't know if you saw it, he's presented to Congress about an incident that happened with his son who got into an accident. I mean, it was a pretty interesting story about how he almost got duped. But the point is, if there's that safe word, you could have that with your kids. So if someone is trying to do a deep fake, you can ask for that and they can say that word and you'll know it is or it isn't them, perhaps, right? But again, just using maybe these tools that we have to be more efficient, to get better coverage with, training people, creating awareness so that they can avoid these issues.
And then on top of that, we've got quantum computing that's going to just that may just leapfrog everything that we've done as far as cryptography and trying to get into systems and protecting systems. That's going to be, I think that's going to be another huge leap in computing kind.
Yeah, well, that's the other issue. It's kind of a related issue, I think, is so many are talking about, well, if we just de-identify the data, it's fine. And there's a whole question about whether you can really de-identify data. Certainly in the not too distant future, that may be something that becomes harder and harder to do.
Especially there, and there's so much data out there now. I think everybody's got, as you said, everybody's got their silos that people are keeping track of and trying to run with. Well, so what are you currently working on that you're most excited about?
A couple of things. One is trying to help. Maybe it's pretty mundane, but it's a good group, and we're trying to help them figure out how do they leverage data that they have about customers to get them back in their store through online marketing, through outreach, and mindful of different activity on their website, mindful of state privacy law issues. There's 20 states now that have that, right? So just trying to work through some of that stuff. And I guess the other thing is just been dealing a lot with companies who are trying to figure out how do they get governance around AI in their organization, which is pretty interesting because a lot of it is it's almost like a two-level analysis. It's, do you want like a high-level governance structure in place? And then you have to think about, well, that high-level governance might not adequately address the nuances of the different use cases that you're trying to implement. And so you kind of have to think about those use cases because that's going to drive ultimately what you want, what kind of safeguards and policies and transparency around that particular use case.
I don't know if you saw a movie, but there was a movie with Catherine Zeta-Jones and I don't remember the guy's name, but basically it was the Massey agreement, the Massey prenup, right? Where he writes these prenups that are just perfect every time, right? And so, but then he falls in love with Catherine and whatever, and then she breaks it for him, and anyways, so that's what people are looking for, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because people are looking for that golden ticket on the policy of AI, the Massey AI
That's right.
policy
That's
that
right.
that
That's right.
fits everything, and without the nuances of the business, it's just going to be the perfect prenup, and they can go to sleep with it, and feel safe.
That's it. I think you're exactly right. That's a great example. That's a great example. And yeah, yeah.
So yeah, now you have to go see that movie if you haven't seen it before.
I'm gonna go look for that. I'm gonna go look
Yeah,
for that.
it was yeah. I'll see if I can find it real quick for you towards the end of it. But we'll move on, and I'll come back to that in a second. So tell us a little bit about who you are, how'd you get here, and a bit about Jackson Lewis.
Right. So born and raised in New York City, practicing law about 25 years, decided to move down to Florida. Loving it down here. It's great. Made a lot of new friends. I started out doing ERISA and tax work as an associate and kind of got into privacy through HIPAA. So I have a pretty deep expertise in HIPAA, but then states started having data breach notification laws and started going through that and just started building out a practice group here at the firm. And we do a lot of pre-breach services, like you were saying, tabletop exercises and policies and compliance work, biometrics, and obviously incident response, kind of soup to nuts on that. And then, of course, when agencies investigate and plaintiffs sue, we defend our clients on the on the business side. So that's kind of what we do at Jackson Lewis. We have a group of about you know 8 to 10 compliance and incident response attorneys, about the same number of litigation attorneys, and that's our practice.
Excellent. I mean, I think that a lot of companies today are looking at like GRCs and how to kind of manage some of those and understand a little bit better. What we find a lot of times is that that's a tool, and they think that it's a magic bullet, right? Kind of like what I equate to what used to be the CRMs of sales, right? It was all I need is Salesforce.com and I can make money, right? And I think that's all I need is the tool of the GRC, and I'm protected. And of course that's not the case. It has to be kind of a cultural change for the people to understand that they've got to use the tool in the right ways. And it's more than just IT that actually has to do that. I mean, everybody's got to do their training, everybody's got to do their parts and understand where the data is and protect it. So I think
That's so true.
that's one of the things that we see.
Yeah.
By the way, the name of that movie was Intolerable Cruelty. So
All right. I'm
that,
writing that down, John.
yeah, because that was, like I said, it was kind of a funny movie. Anyways,
I hope I won't need well, I'm married 30 years, so the prenup option is gone.
which is fine. I'm just saying, it's just kind of one of those funny things where I want the perfect one, right? So the Massey agreement, the Massey
Yeah,
prenup
yeah.
was the one that we came across. So as a lawyer, you might find that one a little bit, might find that one funny.
No, that's great. That's great.
So if you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would it be?
Um, Probably to get into this space more deeply sooner. Not that I didn't like doing benefits, and there's some advantages to that, in terms of, regulatory analysis. And now the DOL finally came around to regulating cybersecurity. Took them a while, but just getting involved sooner. There's so much to learn, and so that's what my advice would have been.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up here, but I mean, so tell us. I mean, I like to give our audience some sort of advice or something dealing with cyber risk. What would be your suggestion for an executive or somebody listening to the show on what should be their next step?
Well, maybe to end where you started, right? To really get a handle on your risk, which is, I think, more important in a lot of ways than cybersecurity itself, is to kind of build out that function. And going back to HIPAA, if you're in healthcare, that's an enforcement objective that's pretty actively enforced right now, in particular by the Office for Civil Rights. But figuring out who on your team you want to sit down with and maybe have periodic conversations about your organization, really understand what risks there are, and then how, and maybe you've addressed them, but maybe you haven't. And I think for any organization, that's really a starting point and will serve you well.
So get a risk assessment done and figure out where to go from there. I like that. All right. Well, then the last thing is how would you like people to reach out to you? I mean, we'll put in links for all your email address and all that if you'd like. But is there how do you prefer to be reached out to?
Email's great.
Great.
Lazzarotti at jacksonlewis.com. That's the best one.
Cool. So there you go. All right, everybody. So that's Joe. I appreciate your time. This has been a great chat, and I'm glad we met through the ways that we did and everything. And so thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
To our audience, thank you for listening. Hope you've learned something today. Maybe laughed or commiserated with some of these issues that we're seeing. And that's it. This is another great episode of Navigating Cyber Risk with your host John. And next time, we'll see you next time. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
This was another amazing episode of Navigating Cyber Risk, powered by Omnistruct. Show us some love by subscribing and sharing today. Reach out to us with any comments, questions, or ideas about future shows by emailing us at podcast@omnistruct.com. Until next time, remember, governance is not a technology.